Hey loves, welcome back to my channel. Today guys, I'll be checking out this interesting video and it's titled Jordan Peterson outsmarting everyone for 15 minutes straight. You guys, I'm excited for this, and without much ado, let's see what this video is all about.
Look at it this way. All right. Women are much more likely to try to commit suicide, and men are much more likely to kill themselves. And the reason for that is that men use lethal force and women don't.
Wow.
Now that's a big difference. Okay, so then you say, well, women manifest aggression towards themselves and to others, but they don't use lethal force. They don't use physical force the same way men do. So they have to do it some other way.
Why do they have to do something some other way? Because you can take your Hobbesian war against, so you're basically a Hobbesian. Like, war of all against all.
Half and half. Half Hobbes, half Rousseau. That's why I'm not an ideologue. Because I don't think that people are good or evil. I think they're both. I don't think that culture is security or tyranny. I think it's both. And I don't think that nature is benevolence or catastrophe. I think it's both. And that's why I'm not an ideologue. One of the things we know, for example, is that, I don't know to what degree it's common knowledge in Scandinavia, but the biggest differences between men and women in the world in terms of temperament and interest are in Scandinavia, and they've maximized as a consequence of your egalitarian policies.
What do you mean by that?
It means that the more egalitarian your state, the bigger the personality differences between men and women. That's like
How do you measure that? How do you know that?
Oh, well, psychologists have perfected, at least to some degree, the measure of personality over the last 30 years with very advanced statistical models.
Yeah, well, then why do you think the outcome, and these countries where the outcome is more equal, why do you think that leads to bigger differences between sexes?
Because there's only two reasons that men and women differ. One is cultural, and the other is biological. And if you minimize the cultural differences, you maximize the biological differences. So, I know everyone's shocked when they hear this. This isn't shocking news. People have known this in the scientific community for at least 25 years. And it's been replicated in the last month 3 times in 3 separate samples, including in Science, which is the world's greatest scientific magazine by a large margin. And it isn't a small effect, it's a huge effect.
The Ministry of Women's Affairs in New Zealand and the Minister of Women's Affairs, or the Minister for Women as she's known, suggested recently that there were too many white old men on boards in New Zealand of private and public companies, and just suggested that they needed to move aside so there could be more diversity. Your response to that suggestion?
Well, what's her racial and ethnic background, just out of curiosity?
I think she's born in America, Julianne Genter. She's a member of our Green Party here.
Is she white?
Yes.
Well, maybe it's time for her to bloody well move aside and let someone who isn't white have her position.
Because this is my interpretation.
I love that answer.
Apparently, all of the people who arranged the protest against you watched all of your videos.
It's like, do you want to disavow?
150 videos on YouTube.
No, your lectures, which sparked the debate.
Okay.
Do you want to disavow the support?
Could you let me talk to her for a moment?
Don't call me that, please.
So, I have 150 lectures on YouTube. There's 500 hours of my views.
Do you really think that you're worth all of that time?
So look, I will answer your question, okay? I've studied Nazism for a very long time. It's been 4 decades, and I understand it very well. And I can tell you that there's some awful people lurking in the corners, and they're ready to come out. And if the radical left keeps pushing the way
that sounds very much like a
they're
threat.
going to come.
That sounds very much like a threat. That sounds very much like a threat.
Political program.
Everything is not a threat.
Of traditional hierarchies, both of gender, of class, so on, though emphatically not of race. And so it seems that
I haven't talked about defense of traditional hierarchies in terms of gender and class. That's not true.
Well, you've talked about hierarchies in society. You've talked about
that's true. I have done that, but I haven't justified them on the basis of gender and class. Whatever it was, categories. Not okay. That's an important distinction.
Okay, but you defend hierarchies in society in a way that you talk a lot about the Pareto distribution, yes?
That doesn't mean I defend it.
Well, okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Question for Professor Peterson.
Wow, you guys, that was funny. And as for the question of knowing if men and women are equal or different? The answer is totally yes. Men and women are equal in every way. And the more study is being carried out about knowing the differences or the similarity between a man and a woman, the more the differences will be obvious. Let me know what you guys think about this. Jordan Peterson is a very interesting man, and the more you listen to him, the more you are drawn into his bank of knowledge, and this is a very interesting one. And let's continue watching, you guys.
Why do you feel that someone's personal gender identity and pronouns infringes your free speech? Can one not also argue, based on your interpretation, that professors can use racial slurs in their classroom and that the inability to do so would violate their freedom of speech?
There's a difference between saying that there's something you can't say and saying that there are things that you have to say. And I regard these made-up pronouns, all of them, as the neologisms of radical PC authoritarians. Do you understand that? And I'm not a fan of that sort of person. And the reason I'm not a fan of that sort of person is because I've done my homework. I've read everything I can get my hands on in the development of authoritarian political systems, and I know the literature inside out and backwards. And I am not going to be a mouthpiece for language that I detest. And that's that. That's pure narcissism at work, by the way. You know, to hijack an event like this that other people put time and effort into, and to use their civility of the crowd and the civility of the organizers as an excuse to blatantly yell out your ill-informed opinions is no way to conduct a civil dialogue. It's absolutely appalling. The people who do that should be embarrassed.
Wow, you guys, that is so funny. And the way this word toxic masculinity is being used baffles me a lot, because when a man knows his place, when he is doing the right thing, he is being referred to as toxic. I don't see where toxicity and being in control, being in charge are synonymous to each other. Let me know what you guys think about this particular word, that the word is always tossing around when a man knows his place. And Jordan Peterson is a full vibe, and I can sit all day listening to this man, and oh my god, he constantly blows my mind every single time, and I'm having fun with this particular one. Let's wrap this video up, you guys.
Okay, so before we move on, boundaries of gender appropriate behavior, well, first of all, that indicates that there's something universal and normative about gender appropriate behavior, which is something that people who push the idea of toxic masculinity generally tend not to presume. And second, it's just as likely to happen among women as among men, in which case it's not toxic masculinity. So I do stand by my original statement, though, that there's a brand of more radical feminism that insists that our culture is best characterized as an oppressive patriarchy, and I think that, first of all, that's an appalling sociological doctrine, and I think it has very negative psychological effects. And they won't be limited to men, because if it's true that there's something toxic, let's say, about masculinity per se, what that will inevitably mean is that as women adopt more masculine roles, traditionally, what is that toxicity somehow going to go away?
But that's a straw man, because no one says there's anything toxic about masculinity per se.
What do you mean no one says that? The term exists.
No,
how is that a straw man?
Well,
but where did the term come from?
It's a phrase that's used about forms of masculinity that are harmful to men and women. It's not about masculinity per se. You must know that.
I read the American Psychological Association guidelines for the treatment of boys and men, and I know perfectly well that this is no straw man. I mean, and I've spoken with no shortage of trans people, and you know, my proclivity has been, without exception so far, to address them in the manner that seems most socially appropriate under the circumstances. Now, you asked a specific question, which was, Do I have special expertise that I might share with other people?
You're doing Martin Luther, and I think that these issues are a little subtler than those. And so,
well, what makes you think that you're doing the kids that are grandstanding any favors by going along with their manipulation?
Because I can't decide which ones those are. Well, I just have my gut instincts, and that's not good enough.
Look, fair enough, but you have a type 1 and type 2 error problem. So one error is that you don't call students what they deserve to be called. That's one error. And the other error is that you call students what they want to be called even though they don't deserve it. And so what you're trying to do optimally is to minimize both those errors. And to do that, you have to take a middle route. Now what you've decided to do, and I'm not criticizing it, is you've decided to allow for the possibility 100% of one of those errors because you think it's a less significant error. And you know, you might be right, but it's not like you're acting in an error-free manner. You've just decided to minimize one form of error at the expense of the other. Because I would say you're allowing, what would you call it, attention-seeking and somewhat narcissistic undergraduates to gain the upper hand over you in your class.
Why is society overly feminized?
Well, I didn't ever say that society was overly feminized. So if we're going to discuss my views, we should use my actual word.
Those are the sorts of problems that trans people face every day, being out of housing, being considered, considering suicide. These are really big problems.
My refusal to use pronouns because left-wing activists want me to use them has nothing to do with whether or not trans people are having difficulties in society. And I'd also like to point out that I've had many letters of support. Isn't it? I've had many letters of support from trans people, and they tell me that the trans activists don't support them, and most trans people actually wanted to be referred to as he or she.
Doesn't mean that you are untransphobic. Just because you know a few people, just because you've talked to a few trans people, you don't know the trans community like the trans community does. You've got no idea what it's like to be trans.
Professor Pete, Professor Pete, I'm sorry to interrupt. Let's let Professor Peterson finish his thought, please.
All right. So the trans activists aren't proper representatives of the trans community because they haven't been elected by the trans community.
Nobody elected you either, Jordan.
I'm not speaking for anyone except myself and on behalf of other people perhaps who want to maintain the right to free speech. I'm not claiming that I'm a representative of white people or white men or any other group. I'm speaking on behalf of myself. And so I'm not taking...
But Professor Peterson, let me jump in there, though, because we have seen an evolution of language. There are words that we don't use anymore.
Not by legislation.
Well, legislation or not, there are words that have evolved. We don't use, for example, I'm Asian. I would bristle if someone called me Oriental. That is an evolution of how we use words. How is this different, whether legislated or not? I understand legislatively, but if at the heart of it is to allow a student to study free of what they feel is discrimination, why not help that along?
I already made my case for why not help that along. I believe that this legislation is extraordinarily dangerous, and there's other elements of it too that we haven't even got to in our society yet, like the protection for gender expression. And I've looked at gender expression in the Ontario Human Rights Code, and as far as I can tell, gender expression is best summarized in a single word: fashion.
That was such an interesting session with Jordan Peterson. I enjoyed this video so much, and Jordan Peterson is a force to reckon with. I love this man so much, and I can't get enough of his knowledge. Oh my gosh, you guys. Every of his video is very impactful and very educating. Let me know what you guys think about this video. Let me know what you guys think about this video. I really had fun reacting to Jordan Peterson. If you guys totally enjoyed watching, give this video a massive thumbs up, comment, share, and all that good stuff. And I'll see you all in my next video. Bye guys.